My name is John Sissel, and I'm a park ranger at Chickamauga, Chattanooga National Military Park. Today, we're standing on the banks of the West Chickamauga Creek, and behind me, the 5,300 acres of eastern woodlands, now the Chickamauga Battlefield, a unit of the Chickamauga Chattanooga National Military Park, was established in 1890 as a result of an act of Congress in the first national military park in the nation. The campaign for Chattanooga is a very complicated one, and it starts in June of 1863 and runs all the way through the end of November 1863. What we find is that the Union Army of the Cumberland, commanded by General Rosecrans, finally begins to move from Murfreesboro south toward the Confederate entrenchments along the Duck and the Elk River valleys in Middle Tennessee. The Confederate Army, the Army of Tennessee, is commanded by General Braxton Bragg. Using a series of what would now be called fairly spectacular maneuvers, General Rosecrans is able to maneuver Braxton Bragg out of his position in Middle Tennessee along the Duck and the Elk River valleys. Braxton Bragg, as a result, will fall back through Stevenson, Alabama, into Chattanooga. Chattanooga, for the Confederates, was seen as the last very strong defensible position that they could take, and it was also important because it was a vital rail center for the Confederates. Also, the Tennessee River flows through the Chattanooga area. At the time of the American Civil War, the city of Chattanooga was about 2,500 in population, and it was an important marketplace as well for the surrounding area, both in southeast Tennessee and for northwest Georgia. The city itself is surrounded by a series of very high plateau type of mountains, most of them rising 12 to 1,300 feet above the valley floors. It was seen as being a very strong physical position, and General Rosecrans now was going to have to come up with a plan to move the Confederate Army out of Chattanooga, hopefully without having to assault these very high hills in and around the city of Chattanooga. For Braxton Bragg, his concern was that now that Knoxville had fallen, that General Rosecrans would unite armies with General Burnside's from Knoxville, thereby creating a Union Army of somewhat over 100,000 men. In early September, the first few days of September 1863, Bragg reported his effective strength in infantry was just something over 40,000. So he was continuously calling for the Confederate High Command to send him reinforcements. Braxton Bragg anticipates the Union assault on Chattanooga coming from the north. General Rosecrans realizes that this is probably what General Bragg is going to think. So Rosecrans divides his army north of Chattanooga. He sends 1/3 of his army under General Crittenden north along Walden's Ridge. In this particular part of the campaign, General Rosecrans has General Crittenden light a lot of fires, stretch his army out, and make it appear as though there is a large enemy force moving down from the north. While in effect, he is sending 2/3 of his army through Stevenson, Alabama, and across Lookout Mountain to the south of Chattanooga in order to threaten Braxton Bragg's line of communications, his supply lines with Atlanta. Because Braxton Bragg is not able to very effectively control his cavalry, he is not aware until too late that this is in fact General Rosecrans' plan. On the very day, September the 9th, 1863, that the Confederate High Command in Richmond decided to send Longstreet's corps from the Army of Northern Virginia in the Eastern Theater of the War to assist Braxton Bragg's Army of Tennessee in Chattanooga on September the 9th. Braxton Bragg's final contingents move out of Chattanooga, and a part of Wilder's brigade, then under the command of General Crittenden, move into Chattanooga. At this point, Braxton Bragg moves his army south. The Union Army, 2/3 of it, again, is to the west of Chattanooga, to the west and south, and Bragg realizes this, and so he sends out deserters and messengers that allow themselves to be captured and so forth, that tell General Rosecrans and his staff that in effect his entire army is demoralized and is retreating south to Rome, Georgia. This gives General Rosecrans the idea that he can just move as far south as he wants at this particular point, and he allows McCook's Corps to get as far south as Alpine, Georgia. Just a few days before the Battle of Chickamauga would occur, the Union Army, the three corps, were separated by almost 60 miles of very rough and rugged terrain. So General Rosecrans has allowed his army to separate itself, and it's not until in the second week of September that General Rosecrans realizes that Braxton Bragg is not actually in full retreat toward Rome, that he has actually concentrated his army with reinforcements from Knoxville in the city of Lafayette, about 10 miles south of what would become the Chickamauga battlefield. So now General Rosecrans' objective is to once again consolidate his army. His northernmost unit is Crittenden's Corps, which by this time is located at the Lee and Gordon's Mill, which is about 1.5 miles south of the present park boundary. Now it's almost a foot race for the two armies to get back into Chattanooga. And with very hard marching, Thomas's Corps and McCook's Corps will move up into what is now the city of Chickamauga, what was then called Crawfish Springs. They will pass behind Crittenden's Corps and move up to what is now the present site of the Park Visitor Center. That will be the extreme Union left at the beginning of the battle. The particular place we're standing this morning here at the Chickamauga Creek, Braxton Bragg's objective has now become to capture these crossings at Reed's Bridge and Alexander Bridge, and also the fords, several little fords along the Chickamauga Creek, move his army across the Chickamauga Creek and interpose the Confederate Army of Tennessee between Chattanooga and the Union Army of the Cumberland. On the 18th of September, right here in this particular location, in the early afternoon hours, Walthall's brigade of Walker's Corps will attempt to cross here. Again, we're going to see Wilder's brigade, which had been detached to Crittenden's Corps. They will be defending this bridge, and they will be on the north side of this creek, and Walker's men will attempt to cross here. Walker's Corps, primarily Walthall's brigade, will attempt to cross here, and they'll fight for a good part of the afternoon with the Confederates sustaining some very severe losses. Finally, just north of here, Bushrod Johnson will push the Union cavalry under Minnie across the Reed's Bridge, and he will gain access to the north and west side of the Chickamauga Creek. At that point, Wilder realizes that he is outflanked here in this position, so he too moves away from here. But he will fight some more on the 18th, and he will play a very important part in the upcoming Battle of Chickamauga. At this particular point the Confederates had gained the advantage by simply gaining the Alexander Bridge here where we are and the Reed's Bridge. But what we'll find is that on the morning of the 19th, when the battle would start, that Bragg was no longer the aggressor. General Thomas sent a division out to capture what had been reported to him as an isolated Confederate brigade on the west side of the Chickamauga Creek. And unknowingly, General Thomas was going to start the two bloodiest days during the American Civil War, the Battle of Chickamauga.
Early on the 19th, General Thomas took the initiative and sent orders to Brannan on the extreme Federal left to attack the small Confederate unit west of the Chickamauga. Colonel John Croxton's brigade was dispatched. They soon ran into Forrest's cavalry. Croxton proceeded to push Forrest back, but was soon startled by an entire division of Walker's Corps under States Rights Gist. Faced with far more rebels than were supposed to be on this side of the creek, Croxton inquired of Thomas, which brigade am I supposed to capture? Brannan quickly sent help, but Croxton was still heavily outgunned. Baird's division was added to the fray and helped steady the shaky Federal lines. The Confederates countered with Liddell's division regaining the initiative, pushing Brannan and Baird all the way back to their jump-off points. Thomas sent for more aid from Rosecrans as he was steadily losing ground. Richard Johnson's division from McCook's Corps was sent out immediately to stem the gray tide. The seesaw motion of battle tilted in the Federal direction once again. Walker called for more support, and soon Cheatham's division was moving into battle. Rosecrans decided to move his headquarters from Crawfish Springs closer to the battle at the Widow Glenn's house. The change didn't really aid much as the kept the battle outside and difficult to follow. Cheatham's successful advance was soon counterattacked by Richard Johnson's division, who threatened to break the rebel line. Major General Alexander Stewart's Little Giant Division plunges into the fight at 2:30, sends Van Cleve's division reeling past the Brotherton farmhouse. Reynolds joins the fight in support of Van Cleve as Stewart threatens the center of the Federals' lines near the Glen Kelly Road. John Bell Hood of Longstreet's corps had waited impatiently to go into battle all day. Finally, at 4 p.m., he put together Law's division and Bushrod Johnson and attacked the Federal line. Hood's attack tears up the division of Jefferson Davis and threatens to overrun the Yankees' position. One of Hood's young soldiers captured in the fighting revealed to Rosecrans that Longstreet's corps was on the field. Rosecrans was incredulous and heatedly accused the youth of lying. The long, confused, bloody day was slowing down, but was not yet over. Patrick Claiborne's division fords the creek at sunset, pushes into the Federal line, capturing many prisoners and nearly a mile of ground. The terrible battle finally grinds to a halt after dark, and both sides suffer through a terrible night, preparing for the inevitable renewal of hostilities. The longest and largest movement of troops by rail up to that time was a significant factor in the Confederate success at Chickamauga. After some debate, Lee, Davis, and Longstreet decided that the best place for most of Longstreet's corps was in the west, aiding Bragg at Chattanooga. Longstreet and many of his men looked forward to returning to Georgia. Old Pete was feeling a little hemmed in Virginia, and he might open up for him, out of Lee's shadow. What started out as a direct trip through Knoxville turned into a terribly detoured route through the Carolinas and up from Atlanta. Longstreet's troops spent 10 days on all sorts of rundown cars over all sorts of worn-out railroads. Longstreet finally arrived at Catoosa Station in Ringgold at 2 p.m. The battle was already underway. Bragg sent no one to greet and guide Longstreet, who spent 2 hours waiting for his horse to arrive. With Colonel Moxley Sorrell, Longstreet headed toward the sound of battle, finally locating Bragg around 11 p.m. Bragg was fast asleep in an ambulance. Bragg quickly joined Longstreet. The two men met and agreed on Sunday's battle plan. Polk would command the Confederate right. Longstreet would command the Confederate left. Bragg wanted D.H. Hill's divisions of Breckinridge and Claiborne to attack early on the far right. But Hill didn't receive his orders until jump-off time Sunday morning. Hill decided breakfast was in order first, so Bragg's plan was delayed even more. The intolerable wait infuriated Bragg, and he personally ordered the units into battle.
Now see his belt buckle.
The fight commences on the Federal left with Breckinridge assaulting Negley's regiments. Breckinridge briefly seizes the Lafayette Road, but is not able to hold it long. Confederate attack moves down the line to include Cleburne's, Walker's, and then Cheatham's divisions. Thomas's well-positioned left holds the rebels at bay and throws them back with heavy losses. But Thomas feels the pressure and asks Rosecrans for more and more reinforcements. crucial point in the battle occurs between 10:30 and 11:30 a.m. when one of Thomas's staff officers, Captain Kellogg, returns to headquarters with startling news. A gap exists near the center of the Union line between General Wood and General Reynolds. Rosecrans is notified, and he quickly sends an order to Wood directing him to close up on Reynolds as fast as possible and support him. Wood knew there was no gap, but obeyed the order without question. Combined movements by Wood, Davis, and Sheridan created a real quarter-mile gap in the Union center. By sheer coincidence, Longstreet has the main body of his corps stacked at the very spot where the gap occurs. An attack composed of Hood, Johnson, and Kershaw's divisions had already started through the woods into the Brotherton field. $23,000 rebels, many of them Gettysburg veterans, poured into the Federals. General Hood rode forward to rally the troops and keep the attack moving. A Federal counterattack suddenly hits the rebels, and Hood is shot in the leg, his second wound in 3 months while riding on an unfamiliar horse. The Confederate juggernaut is just too much for the Yankees. Davis's division is crushed, and panic grips the Federal right as Sheridan's division, and soon most of McCook's corps, are rushing for the lead. Little's brigade attempts to make a do-or-die stand, but Little is shot to the ground, and his troops join the rush to the rear. Rosecrans evacuated headquarters as the mob headed straight in his direction and on to McFarland's Gap. Wilder's brigade was soon all that remained of the Federal right wing. The worst rout of a Federal army since First Manassas was well underway. Not content to wreck only the right wing of the Army of the Cumberland, Longstreet turned his attention a little to the north, where General George Thomas was still holding the Federal left wing. Not knowing the fate of the rest of the Army, Thomas collected parts of all available units around Snodgrass Hill. George Thomas was determined to hold on to his position or die trying. Kershaw struck first, repeatedly hammering the hill, but couldn't budge Thomas.
Okay. All right.
Bushrod Johnson and Thomas Hinman joined the attack and battered the hill, reaching the crest for a brief time. Union ammunition was running dangerously low when Granger's Reserve Corps came to Thomas's aid and held the precarious line.
No, lie down. Keep the pressure in the air. National College up.
Longstreet threw everything he had at the ridge, committing his last unused division, spearheaded by Archibald Gracie's newly enlisted brigade. Thomas learned the fate of the rest of the army from James Garfield, who brought a message to Thomas from Rosecrans to withdraw immediately. Realizing that the entire army would be jeopardized, Thomas vowed to hold his position till dark, earning him the name Rock of Chickamauga. As dusk approached, the rebels captured a significant number of Federals, fighting with fixed bayonets and no ammunition. However, the bulk of Thomas's left wing withdrew into the night and disappeared like magic. Longstreet, unhappy at Thomas's ability to slip away, prepared to give chase the next day. But Bragg didn't want to believe he had won one of the most complete victories of the war. It was also one of the costliest, with 18,000 Confederate casualties and 16,000 Federals, the bloodiest 2 days of the war. Forrest and Longstreet pushed Bragg to press his advantage, to destroy the Army of the Cumberland and retake the important transportation center at Chattanooga. Bragg wouldn't take his collective commander's advice. Instead, he settled into a siege of Chattanooga from Lookout Mountain, a decision that would eventually bring him face to face with U.S. Grant. After the Chickamauga disaster, Washington created a new military division of the Mississippi under Grant, and he immediately replaced Rosecrans with Thomas. Right away, plans were set in motion to dislodge Bragg from his commanding position. Within weeks, the rebels were driven from their mountain stronghold, and Chattanooga was safely in federal hands for the duration of the war. The gateway toward Atlanta was now open. Bragg had squandered the last great Confederate victory.
In the prison I sit, thinking, Mother dear, of you and our bright and happy home so far away. And the tears, they fill my eyes, spite of all that I can do, though I try to cheer my comrades and be gay. Tramp, 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 the boys are marching. Cheer up, comrades, they will come. And beneath the starry flag we shall breathe the air again of the free land in our own beloved home. In the battlefront we stood when their fiercest charge they made, and they swept us off 100 men or more. But before we'd reached their lines, they were beaten back dismayed, and we heard the cry before the door. Tramp, 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 the boys are marching. Cheer up, comrades, they will come.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.